Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good evening, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is Wednesday, May 3rd, Kentucky Derby weekend. But we got some golf to talk about, and we are blessed and honored to have our weekly guest, Brady Kannon from Las Vegas Golfer and Heat Strokes podcast, to come into our studios, break down the Wells Fargo Championship at Quail Hollow, as we are just 3 weeks away from the second major, the PGA Championship. So without further ado, let's bring him in, Mr. Brady Kannon.
How are you, Jeffrey? Yeah, big week. You know, we've got an elevated event on the PGA Tour. Just about every big name is here, except for a couple of notables, Jon Rahm and Scottie Scheffler. And then, of course, like you mentioned, Derby week, the first Saturday in May, one of my favorite days of the entire year. And out here in Las Vegas, we've actually done this a couple times where you go to a local casino and get a spot there in the sports book and bet all the races and, of course, the Derby. And then usually that is followed up by a big prize fight. And one year we went to the Derby, did the whole betting on the races thing at the sports book, had a nice dinner afterwards, early dinner, late lunch, and then went to go see Oscar De La Hoya fight at the MGM Grand Garden Arena many years ago. So I have always loved the first, I never used to be a horse racing fan until I came to Las Vegas and realized, boy, to see these sports books erupt, the most exciting 2 minutes in sports is real. And I have fallen in love with it ever since. And of course, they've, tacked on a prize fight. They've made it a big day here in Sin City, and we enjoy it every year.
Yeah. My time Friday, 12:30, 9:30 back west or out west. Your good friend, Mr. Sean Alvarez, will be here on Friday breaking down his thoughts on the Run for the Roses. So we can't wait. And as you talk about busy weeks, Kentucky Derby, Quail Hollow, second round of NBA, NHL, playoffs, the daily grind in baseball. Who sleeps? I mean, there's no time to sleep.
No, it's a fun time to be a sports fan. That's for darn sure. And a sports bettor as well. Tough to, and let me ask you, Jeff, you obviously talk with a lot of sharp people on your show. Do you handicap, or do you try to handicap every sport yourself, or do you specialize in a couple areas and then rely on smart people for everything else?
For the major sports, I do that myself with the spreadsheets, with the help of a lot of, let's say, big companies that put together what I'm looking for. So I don't take the credit at Spank Odds, for example, for their spreadsheet. I use Wager Talk in college basketball. There's other sources. So each sport, usually a different source. When it comes to the races, the horse racing will bring in Sean. I have a good friend in New York that does the same. And then we pick and choose. I love to get the eyes in the sky in Vegas. We'll have Dave Sharapan come on once in a while, and other sources out there in key sports. I have been in these lanes 8.5 years. I've always looked for a solid soccer guy, a solid tennis person. UFC, we have some people ducking in, ducking out, but we're always open-eared for more sources and more help. And then obviously PGA, you're our source right here when it comes to the PGA.
Well, I handicap PGA Tour golf and NFL football myself and dive into both of those very heavily. And then every other sport that I bet on, and I don't bet on every other sport, but let's say college football, college basketball, baseball, hockey, I'll rely on other people that I know and have come to know over the years, as I trust in those particular areas. I think specialization is key, and jack of all trades, master of none. It's hard. It's hard enough to be really good in one or two sports. It's really hard to be good in 8 to 10.
No, and you're 100% correct. And I go back to January 1st, 2015, and you take yourself back there. There wasn't as much information and sources to where we are now in 2023. So back in the day, I was grandfathered in with Sports Insights, and then action goes, and I wasn't an action guy, so I kind of faded away from Sports Insights. Always been a big Don Best guy, and then then here comes Spank Odds. There's a lot of free sites, Wager Talk, Odd Sharks, Pregame. There's a million. So whatever is good and working, I say, stick with it. And if it's not working, figure out why and maybe move on. But you are 100% spot on. I can't do UFC. I can't do tennis. I can't do soccer. I try to stay focused in what is working best for us. And if you tried to do it all, there's no way in hell you'd never sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you wouldn't be very good in most of them.
100%. Last week we were in Mexico. John Rahm, big favorite, defending champ, Tony Finau. And then, there wasn't a list of stars that there are this week, next week, and then obviously for the PGA. Tony got out there. Rahm makes a surge. But as we talked backstage, as of early or late Friday afternoon, Tony the favorite. And Sunday, I woke up and you could have got Rahm plus 150 before they went off. And I knew right then, there's no way in hell John's winning. Take us back to the weekend, what you saw, and then obviously on Sunday, how it basically unfolded.
Yeah, it was one of my worst weeks on tour as far as pre-tournament. Didn't really come that close with any of the outrights. Only had one guy finish top 20. Went 0 for 2 on my head-to-head matchups. But like we talked about last week, this is only the second year for the Mexico Open at Vedanta, and there's a lot of unknowns about the golf course and how it's going to play out. We don't have any course history to speak of. So I dumbed down the risk, just like I did a few weeks ago, or just the week prior, rather, in New Orleans, when you have a team event, which is a very difficult handicap. So, sometimes it pays not to, extend yourself as much. And that was the case for me when I happened to have a lousy week. Thankfully, I didn't have a lot of outlay. But I was spot on with nailing Finau, once we got to the weekend. And it was really shocking. You alluded to it. We weren't even done with half of the tee times. The late wave had not even teed off on Friday. And Tony Finau was already minus 155 at BetMGM to win the tournament. There was 65% of the golf tournament still to be played, and he was already minus money. I found that astounding. I don't remember seeing that in a long time. And then you got to Sunday, and I wrote an article for the PGA Tour at GolfBet that Tony Finau at the time was minus 125. And I felt that was the side to take. I believe at that time he had a 2-shot lead over John Rahm. And Rahm had just come off of a round on Saturday when he shot an incredible 61. And it should have been a 60. He parred the very last hole, which was like the third easiest hole on the course, a par 5, the 18th hole. And he kind of stumbled a bit and made a par. And I said, is that the beginning of the end? And sure enough, he shot a relatively pedestrian round on Sunday. You know how it is, Jeff. When you go so low on one day, you typically don't follow up and do that again the very next day. You kind of come back to earth a little bit. And Rahm did that, where Tony was pretty steady throughout the golf tournament. He was shooting 5 or 6 under, just every day basically. And, pretty much cruised to victory without too much trouble. So I was right on that call that I thought John Rahm had kind of gone too low to maintain that pace to eventually catch Tony Finau. And Finau being the more consistent, steady player over the 4 days, I thought he would get it done. And I tell you, the guy's red hot. Another thing, Jeff, looking forward here, on Saturday, when it looked like Tony Finau was going to win, and I felt he would, I bet him to win the PGA Championship, and I got him at 33-1. And that's a habit I like to get into. When I have a feeling about a guy for an upcoming event, let's say the Masters is certainly one. I did that with Cameron Smith heading into Kapalua when Cam Smith ended up winning the Century Tournament of Champions last January. He was in the lead after 36 holes, and I didn't think he was going to be caught. And I knew how good he was at Augusta, so I grabbed him at 40-1. By the time they teed off at Augusta, he was probably 25 or so, maybe lower. He ends up in the final pairing. I didn't catch him on the outright, but it was a pretty darn good bet. And the same thing happened with Tony Finau. I could see that I thought he was going to win, and sure enough, when he did win, he was chopped to about 25-1. So I do have a 33-1 ticket on Tony Finau to win the PGA in pocket.
You talked on Saturday about Rahm, and I caught his back nine, and on 18, his second shot, they were saying he was in between clubs and he flew the pin. He was at the back fringe, and then he made a nice putt. He had the right speed. He thought it was going to, I think, go to the right. It went to the left. But as you said, you shoot such a low score. It's tough to fire back-to-back days, especially Saturday and Sunday.
Well, you talk about putting, and he was putting beautifully, if not miraculously. He was gaining over 8 strokes on the field through the first 3 rounds. And that's just not sustainable. I mean, to do that over 4 days is inhuman. And sometimes Jon Rahm is, but that was another factor that I felt, all those putts are not going to continue to fall left and right. And sure enough, they didn't on Sunday. It typically, regresses to the mean is a phrase we like to use in this industry. And it happens quite a bit. It's a real thing. And I thought that happened for Jon Rahm and his putter on Sunday. And, Tony Finau was not really on one end of the spectrum or the other. He was just, basically in the top 5, in the top 10 in all the key categories throughout the week, just playing nice and steady. Like I said, shooting 5 or 6 under, making it look easy. And, he didn't have that real swing round where you expected him to kind of come back to the mean.
Well, as I said to start, actually backstage, apologies. They're back stateside. We have the Wells Fargo at Quail Hollow. Most of the big dogs are there. Next week, if I remember correctly, is the Byron Nelson. And then the following week, we have the PGA Championship. So it's almost like this. I'm going to say this week, and then I don't know what they'll do next week at the Byron Nelson meeting. Will some take it off to get ready for the PGA, and this is the tune-up, or they'll play back-to-back to get ready? But I'm looking at the board right now. Rory, this is on DraftKings, 7-1. Cantlay, 12-1. Tony Finau, 14-1. Xander at 16-1. Victor at 18-1. Jordan Spieth and Cameron Young at 18-1. And then I'll stop at Justin Thomas at plus 2,000. And then, of course, the list goes down from there. There was one name that before you give you a breakdown that's looked a little outplaced for me. And when that happens, I get that, what am I missing? Ricky Fowler at 35-1. Am I missing something?
I don't think so. I think it's too short, in my opinion, Jeff. Yeah. And he's got a tremendous track record here. And, my hat's off to Ricky. I love to see this guy's game returning to form. You remember, I believe it was 2014 when he finished runner-up or top 5, rather, in every major that season. And I'd love to see that Ricky come back to the tour. He won his very first PGA Tour event here at Quail Hollow. And like I say, he's got a great history. The game is starting to round into shape again. And so I think you're seeing a shaded price there because the bookmakers know that he's going to be very popular. He's back in form. He's at a course where he has great history, and I think he'll do well. I wouldn't be surprised at all by a top 20 finish, but now 35-1, I think is pretty darn short to win the tournament. I would think more like 50.
Yeah, and again, it's like when I read the boards and these numbers look out of place. Perfect example is the New Jersey Devils minus 130 to win the series in hockey against the Hurricanes, who have home ice. And I'm shaking my head saying, all right, what do they know that I don't know? So when I'm rolling down here and saw Ricky at 35-1, you're spot on. Good course history, very popular. The Puma kid has had success here, and why should we give the true value at say 5,000 when we can get it at 35-1 and they're still going to hit on 35-1?
Jeff, I'll tell you what, I'll let you in on another little secret here. We talk about Derby week. We've had a couple of Derby prep races, I think, in the world of golf. The Mexico Open at Vedanta, and also this week at Quail Hollow, big beast golf courses. Mexico was over 7,500 yards, or excuse me, just under 7,500 yards. This week we're over 7,500 yards, and Oak Hill is a par 70 at just about 7,400 yards. So there's 3 golf courses right there that are absolute beasts. And I think total driving and the work off the tee, strokes gained off the tee, driving distance, that is going to be in play at all 3 of these tracks. So I think you can use Mexico and this week in Charlotte, North Carolina as Derby prep races, if you will. That's the time of the year anyway, and make your handicap from there leading into Oak Hill, because I do think some of the skill sets needed will be similar. And as far as the secret, I also landed on Ricky Fowler to win the PGA. Now that I got at 80-1, which I think is a much more reasonable price. And it's for the same reasons that we talked about, why we like him at Quail Hollow. I mean, obviously, he's done very well at this golf course. We talked about the similarities, at least in length, and what skill sets might work at Oak Hill. And so that should fit pretty well for Ricky. And he's in good form. I mean, if he has a top 10 finish this week or even better, he's not going to be 80-1 for the PGA anymore. So I thought that was a pretty good number, and I liked my timing on that. And who knows, if he falls off the map, you might be able to get him at 100-1. But I think Ricky is trending in the right direction. And I think, I mean, if you just look at the metrics, he's 8th on tour. When I was looking at this last weekend, he was 8th on tour in strokes gained approach. And that's probably the most important statistic week in and week out. So it's clear that Ricky's game is returning to form in a big way. And I thought 80-1 was fair enough for this guy to slip on a major championship jacket and hoist that Wanamaker trophy.
And so as you are getting closer to these majors, I know weeks and weeks ago, I grabbed a homer to win the U.S. Open. That's one of his home tracks there.
What'd you get?
I did not get a good price.
Okay. Because I would have liked, a lot of people jumped on him before or right around the time he won at Torrey Pines. And this is kind of the strategy I was talking about. If you thought Max was going to win heading into Saturday or something like that, you may have been able to get him at like 50-1 to win the US Open. Now he's probably 30 or 28. And I don't want any part of that.
Yeah, I think I ended up at like 35-1.
Not bad.
I ended up
not
getting
bad.
It. So I'll take that, but I did not get that. I was probably a week, 2 weeks too late to the party, let's say, on that one. But I love your strategy as you're get it now, put it in the portfolio before, 2 weeks too late, like myself.
Yeah, I played 4 guys last weekend to win the PGA. Tony Finau at 33, Ricky at 80. I grabbed Victor Hovland, and I think it was at 30. And I played one more guy, and I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head right now who it was, but it was a guy kind of in that 35-1 range that has been trending well, and I think has the skill set to fare well at another big boy beast of a golf course. And then I'll probably just wait until the week of and maybe add 3 or 4 more outrights when we get to the week of. But wanted to get ahead of it with a few guys anyway that made sense at the time.
Well, here we are. We are 3 weeks away. Quail Hollow. It's going to be an amazing, amazing weekend. I'm going to turn the course over to you, my friend.
Yeah, this is a good one. I mentioned it's an elevated event, and if people aren't familiar with this golf course, well, just go back to last September where they held the President's Cup. That is Quail Hollow. Go back to 2017 when Justin Thomas won the PGA Championship, again, at Quail Hollow. Those are the only 2 years that it has not hosted the Wells Fargo. And don't get confused looking at last year's leaderboard. Last year, they held it at TPC Potomac because of the President's Cup. And then in 2017, they held it at Eagle Point, another golf course in North Carolina, to get ready for the PGA. But 16 out of the 18 years it has been here at the Quail Hollow Club. Just a fantastic golf course that has really become one of the favorites of all the players in the world because they recognized that this is championship caliber. And sure enough, it's now being rewarded with championship type events. And it's got the PGA coming back to Quail Hollow again in 2025. I mentioned total driving and strokes gained off the tee, distance off the tee. How about Rory McIlroy? He got his first PGA Tour victory ever here. He has the course record 61. He's won this golf tournament 3 times. And oh, by the way, he also happens to currently lead the PGA Tour in driving distance. So I think there's a relationship there. If you go back to all the winners at the Wells Fargo Championship at Quail Hollow, Jim Furyk is the only guy that ranked worse than 28th in the field that week for driving distance. So it is a big boy Bombers golf course, but not as much as we saw last week in Mexico, where you could kind of spray it all around and not get into too much trouble, no rough to speak of. You can't quite do that here at Quail Hollow. You need to be long and straight, and that metric is total driving. So that's certainly one of the more important ones this week. And then basically everything else is important as well, Jeff. You've got 3 of the 4 par 3s here that measure over 200 yards. Your primary distance for approach shots are going to be between 175 and 200. 9 of the 11 par 4s are between 450 and 500 yards. So, and then they're scrambling. You've got firm and very fast Bermuda grass greens. It's a major championship type place where you have to do everything well. But I do put an emphasis, a weighted statistic, if you will, on the driving statistics, total driving, strokes gained off the tee, and driving distance. Not driving accuracy, but all the ones that basically measure length and efficiency.
Big boys. I mean, it's 7-1. I can tell you this: if I grab Rory at 7-1, he'll crash on me. I love Rory to death. Obviously, every year I get the Masters for him. I want to see him, get the 4 slams. Cantlay, Finau. I mean, it's a loaded top end board. Unlike last week where it was Rahm, then a big dip. I mean, on DraftKings, there's a $500 difference. Is Rory on your radar this week?
Well, I'll tell you what, he's not only on my radar, he's on my card. Okay. And I grabbed him at plus 750. And this is an odd trend that I was not aware of. This did not fall into my handicap, and it is pretty random. But 2 of the 3 times that Rory McIlroy has won here at Quail Hollow has been after he missed the cut at the Masters. So that's kind of interesting. Now, related to that, I got him at plus 750, and I would say plus 650 or better is still a pretty good price on Rory, considering, I mean, he just checks every single box. He's got course form. He's got course history. He's got really pretty good form coming in. I mean, he finished 2nd or 3rd at Bay Hill. He won at Congaree in South Carolina back in the fall, which is another Tom Fazio design. He checks all the boxes as far as the correlated courses. About the only thing he's done wrong recently is miss the cut at the Masters. He had a 3rd place finish, I believe it was, at the WGC match play. So it's not like he's really been off the map as far as form. And as I mentioned, he has the course history here. Outside of his 3 wins, he's also finished 2nd, 10th, 8th twice, and 4th. So this guy is just an absolute horse for this course. And that's why I think the price is okay, all the way down to about plus 650 or 6-1. So I grabbed him at plus 750. My second choice, my second shortest shot was Cameron Young. I took him at 21-1. And he is another big boy off the tee. He ranks 16th on tour in total driving. He is 5th on the PGA Tour for proximity to the hole from 175 to 200 yards, that distance that they're going to face on a lot of approach shots that I mentioned a little bit earlier. Here's another thing, kind of the intangibles, right? Like Jimmy the Greek used to say. This is an interesting angle here with Cameron Young. If you recall, Webb Simpson and his caddy, Paul Tesori, after a long, terrific relationship, decided to call it quits. And Webb kind of recommended that Tesori go with maybe a protege of his in Cameron Young. They're both graduates of Wake Forest, only about an hour away from this golf course. So Cameron Young, probably very familiar with Quail Hollow, the golf course, but now he gets Paul Tesori on the bag, who has not only caddied for Webb Simpson at this tournament a number of times, but Webb is a member at Quail Hollow. So is there a better caddy to have on your bag this week than Tesori at this golf course? That's another reason I like Cameron Young. Victor Hovland, I took at 21-1. One of the best drivers of the golf ball in the entire world. He is 4th on tour in total driving and actually surprisingly 39th on tour in scrambling. He's finished 3rd here in his only other trip to Quail Hollow. And, I think this guy's just playing really, really good golf right now. He was your first round leader at the Masters, ended up finishing 7th there at Augusta, and then just kept it going when he headed over to Harbor Town for the RBC and shot a 64 to open up that golf tournament. So I think Victor's in really good form right now. He also has finished 2nd at Torrey Pines. That's another correlated course I used this week where total driving and scrambling are very, very important. And Victor's had success there. Sunjay Im at 25-1, 17th on tour in total driving, 17th in scrambling. He's got a 6th place finish at Torrey Pines as well as a 4th place finish. And then another correlated course I used was Caves Valley. This is also a Tom Fazio design where they played the BMW Championship in 2021, and Sunjay Im finished 3rd there. I believe Rory McIlroy finished 8th. So Rory seems to kind of be a Tom Fazio specialist. And then Sam Burns at 36-1. I was able to pluck that number off at Circa very early in the posting. And the last time I looked, it had plunged all the way down to 27-1. I don't love it at that price, but I would say 30-1 or better on Sam Burns is not bad. He is really a Bermuda grass putting specialist. And if you look at the last 36 rounds in this field, Sam Burns is 2nd for strokes gained putting on Bermuda combined with 3-putt avoidance. He is also 7th on tour in total driving, and he also has an 8th place finish at Caves Valley. And he's been a hot player too. Won the match play back in March, just before the Masters there. And Sam Burns, not only good around the greens, but can blow it pretty well off the tee as well. And speaking of bombing it off the tee, Gary Woodland was my longest bomb, and certainly a bomber he is. At 80-1, I took a shot with Woodland, and I've seen his number dip all the way below 70-1. I would say 70-1 or better is still a decent price on Gary Woodland. He's finished top 5 here twice. He's got 2 top 10s at Torrey Pines. He is 12th on tour in total driving. So he's got history here. He's got the skill set, and he's been playing pretty decent golf. Had a decent week in Mexico with a couple rounds in the 60s last week as well.
I love the board and your numbers. You got some great numbers, and some of them aren't. DraftKings can be a little finicky here, but Burns down to 30-1 and Woodland at 65-1. But your other numbers, again, pretty close, and hats off to you and Mr. Circa and Mr. Benson for hooking you up with a nice ticket there.
Yeah, I beat him to the punch this week. We'll see if I can cash the ticket. That's what matters in the end, right?
Absolutely. First round leaders, there's a lot of guys out there that this is what they enjoy. In other words, they think it's easier to, anyone can have a great 18 holes, but it's hard to obviously pick someone pre-flop, especially, that's going to do well and potentially hold up the trophy and the win on 72 holes. And I know some people in our lanes, Brady, that bombers in the first round. Now you're talking, this is horses for courses, and there are some big bombers here. I'm kind of interested to see where you might have leaned this week in your first round leaders.
Well, it is a horses week indeed, with the first Saturday in May upon us here. I wrote an article for the PGA Tour. I talked about the Derby prep races here, that we talked about on the program in Mexico, and this week, the Derby being the PGA Championship in this case. But as far as first round leader, we don't necessarily want a horse for the course, Jeff, but we want to find a really good quarter horse. Okay.
That's right. That's good.
Get out to a fast start. And I actually landed on a couple of guys that I took for overall outrights as well. And that was Victor Hovland and Sungjae Im. I took Victor Hovland, and I think, I've already illustrated that with this golf course, this is close to a major championship as you get, the Players Championship, Riviera, Quail Hollow. Those are the big boy events. And we've got another one here. And is as evidenced by what you need to win around this place. You really need to do everything well. You got to scramble. You got to putt your irons off the tee. Now, I mentioned I'm kind of weighting what you do off the tee, but again, overall, you've got to do everything well. Now, for Thursday, what I did is I kind of took that macro handicap, but I also want to find guys that can get out of the gate quickly and make a lot of birdies and not make a lot of bogeys. Victor Hovland, he was your first round leader at the Masters. And I mentioned he followed that up by shooting a 64 the very following week at Harbor Town. Now, he is second currently on the PGA Tour in first round scoring average. He is 15th on tour in birdie average, and he is 11th on tour for birdies or better on par fours. And of course, this is a par 71 golf course, so you've got 11 par fours out there. So if Victor is able to take advantage of some of these par fours with birdies, that's going to put him ahead of the game. Over the last 12 rounds, he is fourth in this field for strokes gained off the tee, fifth for strokes gained approach, and 12th in bogey avoidance, and third in greens and regulation gained. Also, on two separate occasions this season, in 2023, I should say, Victor Hovland has had first rounds where he gained more than 5 strokes on the field. So he does obviously have the macro skill set, and also on occasion has a knack to get out to a fast start. So 33-1 on Victor Hovland, Sungjae Im at 35-1. He is 7th on tour in first round scoring average. He is 12th in bogey avoidance. Over the last 12 rounds, he is third in this field for birdies or better gained, 9th in strokes gained on the par fives, and 2nd in strokes gained off the tee. And then I mentioned Victor Hovland having a couple of rounds where he's gained 5 strokes or better on the field in round one. It has been 4 occasions for Sungjae Im in 2023 in the first round where he has gained 4 or more strokes on the field. And then finally, my third play in the first round leader market is Patrick Rodgers at 80-1. He's been really playing some good golf lately. And in his career, he has finished as high as runner-up here at Quail Hollow. So he's got some history here. He's got some current form going for him. He is also number 1 on the PGA Tour for rounds shot in the 60s. Over the last 12 rounds, Rodgers 8th in strokes gained off the tee, 15th in strokes gained approach, 10th in bogey avoidance, 24th in birdies or better gained, 6th in greens and regulation gained, and 8th on the par fours, measuring 450 to 500 yards. So I thought the first round, you talked about guys that really focus on the first round leader and not so much on the tournament outrights. Hey, stick with what you're good at. We kind of talked about that earlier, but truthfully, it is a harder market. It's a much higher hold percentage. It's much more volatile. It's much more random. You and I've talked about this before. When we're handicapping these guys, we're relying on their skill set to develop and manifest over the course of 4 days. Anything can happen in one day. So I think it is much more of a needle in the haystack to try and land on who's going to be the low guy on Thursday in this case, or any day for that matter, rather than over the course of 4 days. So it is absolute hot dog money, not even pizza money, not even beer money, but bad hot dog money at the gas station on the first round leader market.
You talked about a quarter horse, and I can just see the late night Saturday nights at Los Alamitos. You get
yes, absolutely.
And I call them the flash and fade. They get out for a couple hundred yards, but that's your horse, and then the wires, another 1,000 yards, and you're looking, and your horse is backing up this way. It's everyone's going right by him. So, I 100% agree with you. And sometimes the hardest part is, if you got a handful on the outrights pre-flop, and then, like, for instance, and then Rory hits the lid, and well, as salty as you might be, but if you're still in contention, hey, you're not going to poo-poo the fact that Rory goes out and shoots 7 under, but you didn't have a ticket on him as a first round leader.
Sure, absolutely, I'll take it. I mean, if Rory's your first round leader, okay, that's fine with me. I do have some head-to-head matchups. Speaking of Rory, I was all over Rory this week. Of course, I mentioned I took him outright at plus 750. I got pretty chalky with the head-to-head matchups this week. I took him at minus 140 over Patrick Cantlay, and I've actually seen that price get more expensive. I took him at minus 170 over Xander Schauffele, and I've seen that price get more expensive. You might be able to find it cheaper. I don't know. I haven't looked in at least 24 hours or so. And then finally, I took Cameron Young at minus 135 over Matt Fitzpatrick.
All right.
I've been in a slump. I got off to such a hot start, Jeff, on the head-to-head matchups. I think I was like 21-9 to start the year, and it's gone south the past couple of weeks. I think I'm now down to about or maybe 23-15. So still a pretty good record, but it's regressing to the mean in the past couple of weeks, if you will.
Well, and that regression, the R word, has peeked its head out with us here. We've been on an amazing 23 week run, and you can see it coming. The MLB market has shifted, and it's a lot harder to get into what we were doing. So I know that R word well, but listen, 23-15, that's still profit, and you're still crushing it there. As we close next week, Byron Nelson, correct?
Correct. McKinney, Texas, just outside of Dallas, TPC Craig Ranch. A relatively mundane golf course, and it really probably is going to favor bombers once again. Now, we've seen KH Lee win here 2 years in a row, and I wouldn't say he's the quintessential bomber, but I've kind of typically landed on more bombers at this course because it's wide open. What they've only used this course, I can't remember if it's the second year or now the third year. I think this will be the third year that they've used TPC Craig Ranch for the Byron Nelson. And the first year, not knowing any better, I took Bryson DeChambeau because I thought he was going to be able to just overpower the golf course, and that was not the case. But it might be another tournament that would be 3 times in the last 4 weeks where I dumb down the risk a little bit again, Jeff, maybe save some bullets for the PGA. And also, again, it's a relatively unknown golf course where we've had the same guy win 2 years in a row. I may tread a little lightly next week in Texas.
Well, we can't wait there. I got a lot of stuff, a lot of notes to donate, and then cash on Sunday to DraftKings. As always, we can't thank you enough. The scroll has been going. Please go follow Brady at Las Vegas Golfer. You can find his work at golf_com, Golf Bet PGA Tour at Sports Grid, and go check out his podcast at Heat Strokes Pod. Go subscribe on all the places that you can find it. It's there. I enjoyed last week's, and tell everyone where they can find all your work. Oh, and Sports Grid TV. I forgot. You'll be on there later tonight as well.
Yeah, while you're getting ready to eat dinner and watch the Vegas Golden Knights, right? You're going to see my mug there on your screen. Sports Grid TV, the Heat Strokes podcast. I'm glad you liked it, Jeff. Thank you very much for taking a look and your nice comment there on YouTube. I appreciate that. I think it's been received very well so far. We've had some great guests there giving their insights not only on the picks for that week's PGA Tour event, but also reviewing some local golf courses that we play here in Las Vegas and around the Southwest. Of course, Las Vegas Golfer on Twitter. And then you mentioned my articles for both Golf Bet at the PGA Tour and also golf.com. So thanks for all the plugs there. And yeah, I'm all over the place. If you can't find me, you're doing something wrong.
That's right. Go check him out. Great show as always. We got some winners here. And next week, we will be 1 week away from the PGA, the second major, and Mr. Byron Nelson. As always, Brady, thank you so much. And all the viewers and followers, Billy, give Rebecca a hug for me. Tell her I said hello. And everyone else, please go follow, and we will see you soon.